So somebody that's just starting out or just started it, what would be your short advice as to where to focus and start?
Um, I so I'll tell you what we've learned over the past decade, and I think it's been reiterated throughout this conversation, but to drive it home, uh, know your footprint, know your facility, know your grid, because what the investments you make in these sustainability goals are going to be in the ground for 20 to 30 years, and where they're put, and how they help the entire local economy and the entire grid, I think is really important. So really understanding your load shape, really understanding what technologies are best for your particular facility need, and then understanding what technologies are best for your grid need is really important. I think that the grid could handle a lot more renewables than it has on it right now, I'm not by any means saying anything different. But what I do think is that if we want to get to this scale that we want to get to, if we want to empower the number of businesses that we want to see, that Steve and I work with together in Reba every day to create this path, we need to make sure that we're doing it very thoughtfully and locally. And we need to make sure that we're doing it in a way that actually opens doors. And so my advice is really, really, really understand your system first before participating in anything. And then also, there are a lot of, quick plug for Reba, but there are a lot of other companies that are willing to sort of share their knowledge on this, and also have taken some of the hits and done things poorly, and created bad programs or signed bad PPAs, and are willing to talk about that. And I think the other thing is, and this is sort of, I think a truth to a good program is that, Steve and I have worked utilities before that work for both, you know, retail with very different load shapes and data centers. And so if we can do that, I think that there's opportunity to sort of scope in many different, load shapes and many different facilities. So really know your grid, really know your grid, really know your facility. And then the other thing is that, you know, just procurement is not enough. We've got to work on the tariffs. We've got to work on the rate design. They've got to fit. Adding a bunch of renewables to the system without changing the way we look at our rate structures is just going to end up, with butting heads, down the road. And so make sure that you're thinking about both when you get into this, and what type of tariffs do we really need, and push on that to get this amount of renewables and carbon-free energy on the scheme well.
So I think it's a variation on the theme that Caroline presented, but really is first focus on your facilities. How are you using energy? Have you done everything you can on energy efficiency? Is that a focal point, which it needs to be? Are you to distribute energy resources? And where that really ties in and is important is from a carbon standpoint. The electricity you don't consume through your energy efficiency efforts and the more efficient use of energy, or the electricity you produce with clean resources behind the meter, that directly offsets your carbon emissions. So it's one for one. So those kilowatt hours are critical, and that's the first place I would start. From there, work outwards. What are local resource or community options like community solar, or some states allow for shared community solar resources. How can, or look at microgrids. How can you look at packages and programs that again are really locally focused, both on your facility as well as your surrounding community. From there, you move to the utility options. Work with your utility. Again, this can touch on energy renewables. In the future, it will touch on zero carbon, and find out what sort of programs and other opportunities are available. And if you have capacities to do so, begin talking about resource planning. Get involved in those procedures and A lot of that, steps into regulatory, which for a lot of customers isn't necessarily a comfortable area, but that's where a lot of it goes on. And then finally, look at the relevant regional options to drive larger scale deployments. Because ultimately, for whatever you're doing on renewables and zero carbon, you want to keep it as close to the power that's coming into your meter or behind your meter as possible in order to get the best bang for your buck, and really drive the positive change that